Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a quick knife video for you. I'm out here just on my back porch. It's beautiful weather. It's late October, so I thought, you know what? The lighting is nearly perfect right now, so let me take a few minutes and throw a quick video together. I am on my phone. I don't have a script, so I'm going to try not to ramble on too much, but I want to talk with you just a little bit about action. And that is, you know, how does the knife deploy when I want to get the blade out of the handle? All right, so first, let me give you my working definition, and that is a good action is an action that is reliable to open the knife when I want it open. Okay, so if I push the flipper tab or if I put my finger on the thumb stud and push, does the knife deploy when I want it to? Okay, and the reality is all of these actually meet that definition. So even the hinderer that people complain about so much, it always opens when I want it to open. Okay, so it's by my working definition of an action, and that's as a reviewer, that's what I use. Does the knife open when I want it to open? All right, so all of these meet that criteria. Now, beyond that, there are things that I really like or really don't like, and you may hear me talk about a knife in a video where the detent is a little soft or the detent is a little hard or something is a little uncomfortable, and all of those things, you know, are sort of going above and beyond, is it a good action or not? Now we're getting into some minutia of how this is working. So when I talk about all of these knives, just all of them, I want you to know all of them meet my definition of a good action. Okay, and now let me talk about some of the different things that I like and appreciate. I want to start with this guy. This comes from, I put these three together because these all have what I'm going to call a pretty snappy detent. And that means it's a very clean breaking detent, and when the detent breaks, that blade flies out of there pretty hard. These also happen to be very smooth, and I don't have an example of an action that isn't very smooth. That was the W611. This is the Riot Knives Torrent. I don't have any actions here that aren't fairly smooth, but you can get a snappy knife. That is a knife that really deploys firmly, that the detent is pretty stiff, and it really comes out with some authority, but it's not very smooth. Okay, when you go to close the knife, you can feel that. And I'll give you this example. This is the Boker Lateralis, which, by the way, is a great knife, and the action on this is actually pretty good. The detent's not super hard, but this is an action where when I first got it, the knife deployed effectively all the time. When I flip the blade open, it opens, no question. Okay, but when you go to close the knife like this, you could feel that it was gritty, that it didn't feel nice and smooth. Okay, and so I wouldn't, you know, that would be, it would still be an okay action. I would still say, hey, it does what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't feel as nice as I feel like it should. Now, since that time, I've cleaned this up, I've oiled it a little bit, and it is much, much better. And so now it's in a different class, but I'm just using it as an example for a second there to let you know. By the way, all of these, despite the fact that they all have very good and very smooth actions, have different, well, not all of them, but a lot of them have different methods going on inside. So this is double row ceramic. This is single row. This is single row ceramic. This is single row ball bearing. Now, I've got this one out for a reason. I'll talk about it in a second. But let's move on to these guys, okay? These all have good actions as well. This one's probably, out of these three, the snappiest, but it's not super, super strong, okay? And you can see that as I can open this with the fuller, either with my thumb or even I can spider flick it, okay? This is, of course, the Steelcraft Bodega, large size. And this action, again, it's good, it's smooth, but it's not a snappy action. It's a little bit softer on the detent. Same is true of the Lateralis, same is true of the Swift. Again, it's very nice. And the geometry, now I'll bring this one back for a second. I'm going to compare these two in a minute, but the geometry on this is really nice, making it flip out a little bit harder, but it's not a really, really stiff detent. Okay, now when we're thinking of that, let me compare this to this knife, and I want you to look closely at these two. Let me get some stuff out of the way. I want you to look closely at the relationship between the pivot and the flipper. The pivot and the flipper. You see how this is lower than the pivot? As far as I'm concerned, that's not a good spot to put that flipper. The knife still deploys when I want it to. I wonder if I can get it to fail. No, it's very smooth, okay? The action on this is very, very smooth. That is very little friction. And because of that, it works even when I don't flip it that well. But if this had any issue with not being as smooth as it is, this wouldn't be a knife that would fail sometimes, because you don't get a lot of leverage here. You have nowhere to go, okay? And so the difference between these two, this knife, you could actually, even if the bearings weren't that great, you could overcome quite a bit of friction with that flipper design, because it's nice and high and you get a lot of leverage on that blade, making that it flip out very, very nicely. Okay, so that's my little discussion. So snappy action, smooth blades, good action, but not super snappy. This guy is somewhere in the middle. It flips out pretty hard. It's reasonably stiff detent, but it's not as smooth as any of these. It doesn't feel as polished as the others. And I've got this out for that reason. This is not a knife that I get a great deal of joy from flipping. I love this knife. I think it's probably the best looking WE design out there. You can kind of get a look at my face in the mirror polished, or nearly mirror polished bevels there. Gorgeous, gorgeous knife. The action is not superb. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about these two for a second. This is what I'm going to call a slightly soft detent. It's not horrible, but it's not amazing either. It does always deploy when I go to open the knife. Again, that's my basic working definition of what a good detent is. And it's very smooth, especially, you know, this is as smooth as some of these much more expensive knives, and I've got to give them a lot of credit for that. But it's a pretty soft detent. Here's another one with a pretty soft detent, and I can actually get this to fail. There you go. So if I'm not sort of paying attention to what I'm doing, now if I thumb flick it, never fails. And if I use just a little bit of wrist, or if I'm just a little bit intentional about that, if I preload it, it flips pretty well. Finally, let's talk about thumb studs for a second, and both of these are good examples. Very, very smooth, okay, and this rat one is amazing. Now, probably because I've carried it a lot and used it a lot, it's very well worked in, but it is smooth as silk. The detent is set just right, so it deploys exactly how I want it to, when I want it to. This WE is, again, an example of the detent is set just right. The thumb stud is fairly accessible. It's definitely nicer than the rat, but both of them are quite good. The WE does impress on the smoothness. Look at that. Okay, so there you go. Those are a bunch of thoughts on detent. So we've covered snappy detent, smooth action. We've covered geometry on the detent. We've covered maintenance. Okay, with this guy, it wasn't great when I got it. Now it is much, much better. We've covered, this is a very balanced detent. We haven't really talked about that. And this is what Spyderco's always going for. And that's why people keep complaining with knives like the Domino, with knives like the Magnitude, and now the Sliver Axe. Spyderco is trying to keep a soft enough detent that you can still deploy the blade like this. Well, this is a pretty stiff detent, and it works really well. I have no problem deploying the blade. Okay. Have I stopped? Oh no, haven't stopped. Sorry. So you can get it right. Spyderco just can't do it. But there you go, guys. Those are a number of thoughts on detent. Hope you enjoyed the video. I know I was a little bit rambly. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, some of your feedback down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.